Welcome everyone to Children and Families Affairs. Sorry for the delay. Can't be two places at one time, so we're waiting for a quorum. So we appreciate your patience. Haley, would you please take the roll?
Representatives Bricken, here. Eldridge, Farmer, here. Gillespie, here. Harris, here. Stewart, here. Chairman Littleton.
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Haley. Are there any personal orders from the members? Well, I'll take a moment. I have a shadow today. Her name is Grace Estes, and she happens to be the valedictorian for Stewart County. So, welcome. We like it when young people come to visit and see how things work around here. So, do we have anything? Okay. So we're ready to call up House Bill number 1, House Bill 1974. Representative Johnson, you are recognized.
Motion. Second.
Properly motioned and second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a bill that limits caseloads to 12 for DCS. The industry standard, according to social workers, is that number 12. Currently, DCS caseworkers, many are burdened by caseloads of 40 to 50 or more. This new law would revise the standards so that there are no more than 12 active cases relating to initial assessments, including investigations of an allegation, child abuse, or neglect, 12 children monitored and supervised in active cases relating to ongoing in-home services, or 13 children in active cases in which children are in out-of-home placement related to ongoing services. The current expectation for social workers and their workloads is creating a toxic workplace environment where the caseloads are too high and kids are being put at risk. One specific child in Tennessee has spent over 4 years in foster care, and in the past 21 months, they have had 6 different case managers assigned. This story is not just one specific case. This is all too common in Tennessee. Children are being tossed around to different case managers because the workload is too much. DCS employees are quitting because of the stress, therefore forcing children's cases to be moved around so much. This creates more trauma for the child. A study concluded that Tennessee has a trauma percentage of 20 to 23%. This can lead to extremely unhealthy behaviors later on in life and cost the state billions of dollars in worker absenteeism and healthcare costs. Currently, DCS workers in Tennessee are taking 50 or more cases at a time, leaving them with an average of 3.2 hours per child per month. Often this is taken up in drive time because they have to cross counties to get to a child's home. With this legislation, they'd be able to focus on a child for 12 hours a month. This will allow them to give individualized support to our children to best fit their needs. The number of children in need in case management has risen by 2,113 since 2010. But DCS increasingly suffering with a lack of employees. Currently, they have about 550 unfilled case management positions. This leaves 2,100 case managers to cover for those 550 positions. They need help now. I hear from folks in East Tennessee who are called to close cases in Davidson County. Think about that drive time already added to their already busy schedules and their already high caseloads. There has already been litigation over overloaded case managers in Bryan A, which required reforming the DCS. If we do not act now, more litigation will be inevitable. Children cannot live in these conditions, and social workers cannot work in these conditions. Here are some comments from some social workers, some of the DCS workers on a culture study. There were hundreds and hundreds of responses. We chose the ones that we saw most often. Executive leadership is scary. They're stressed out and they take it out on staff. It's like being in a domestic violence relationship. You have a good day and those are great, but when you have bad days, they're really bad and you never know what the trigger is. The power and control cycle is frightening. The lack of support and overall negative and rude emails that my team and I receive from the top really make me want to leave DCS at times. Another one, they do not care about anything but the overall numbers. Another one, there are half as many workers taking on twice as many cases. With the redesign, we are getting more cases screened in. This increases the number of cases that are assigned to case managers. This job rarely feels like it's about the children anymore. I often feel that we are just a value on a spreadsheet. Everyone that my team leader and I supervise are on medication for anxiety or depression. Here's some quotes from foster care families. One of the kids needed residential and is on a waiting list. She's sleeping at a house where there are 12 foster kids, and during the day she goes and sits in the offices all day. They try to get her to school, but they can't always get her there, so she sits in the office all day. She is 13 and sleeps in a room with 3 16 and 17-year-olds. Another, we went through 3 DCS lawyers in less than 2 years and 4 DCS caseworkers in a year. I don't think enough people are aware of the things that are happening to kids in foster care. Another says, she said foster parents like her often can't get in touch with DCS caseworkers who oversee the kids' care and approve things like medication. You ask questions, well, that's not your caseworker anymore. Okay, well, who is the new caseworker? And you never know when you're going to hear who the new caseworker is. In January and February, 40 to 50% of home visits didn't even happen in Davidson County. Kids are sleeping on the floors of DCS offices. This legislation and legislation with numbers like it have passed in Alabama, Florida, Texas, Indiana, Delaware, Alaska, Maryland, South Carolina. And what they're all seeing is progress and better outcomes, as well as worker stability and stability with the families that they use their services. This bill supports each of the tenets of the National Association of Social Worker Ethical Principles by doing these things. Helps those in need and addressing social problems. Children in care cannot advocate for themselves and therefore are vulnerable. It allows social workers to challenge social injustice. The overload caseworkers are experiencing now is an injustice to them. It's an injustice to the children and to the foster care system as a whole. The children are valued through appropriate care when caseworkers are able to give them more individualized care. This individualized care provides resources to help the children and their families, therefore honoring the importance of human relationships. Case managers are able to build trust and confidence through collaboration in their profession. So here's why this bill is so important. It allows case managers over 9 more hours per child per month. It promotes the health and well-being of a vulnerable population. It allows agency success by improving children's outcomes and maintaining great employees and saving the state money in the long run. I know that the department wants to improve their outcomes. It reduces the amount of trauma experienced by children in care, and that reduces the overall cost in Tennessee by $5 billion annually. This savings would come from healthcare and worker absenteeism spent as a result of trauma experienced in DCS care. Yes, there's a fiscal note on this bill. However, while the initial budget is impacted by this legislation, the amount saved from reduced trauma makes up this loss. But we shouldn't want to reduce trauma because it's cost effective. We should want to reduce trauma because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
In a perfect world, we wouldn't even need DCS. In a semi-perfect world, maybe 12 caseworkers per child or per family, or 12 families would be a semi-perfect, but we have neither. And I know that we're now trying to work on the 20, which, came in with the Brian lawsuit. So I don't know how we would ever even manage the 12. We can't find people to work as it is in any of the departments. There are caseworkers, their positions are open now. So I do think in a perfect world we wouldn't need any of it. But our world's not perfect, and we're not perfect. So those spaces are just not available. Do you recognize?
But the reality is other states are doing it. They're hitting that number 12. Some have gone up to 15, but mostly it's 12 and 13. They're sticking at the nose, and we're talking about comparable states like Indiana, southern states, or Alabama, Florida, Texas are able to do this, and it's saving them money down the road, and it's really critical. We have kids in double digits dying in custody in the last 2 years. We're not doing best for those kids, and we have to make that investment. The workers, I talked with the department, and they're concerned about paying workers more. The reality is you can pay workers $100,000 a year, but they won't want a job where they've got 60 on their caseload, and kids are at risk because they can't get there, because they're crossing 3 counties to get to one of their kiddos. And so the reality is we have got to do this. Kids' lives are at stake.
But the true reality is that we've hired someone to go out to try and recruit caseworkers. We don't have enough as it is to cover the cases that we do have. And I sympathize with all of them, and I know what you're saying. We may need them, but we can't find them. We can't even find the ones that are open, the positions that are open. There are a lot of them, and we can't find anyone to take them.
The word is out that this is not a job that you can sustain yourself and your family. I mean, I talk to so many workers weekly that just say, I don't know how much longer I can do it. We've had people resign at 2 years away from retirement, 3 years away from retirement. They say, I'd love to stay. I can't do it. And they're not complaining about the money. They are complaining about the fact that it's affecting their family and it's affecting their mental health because they can't give those kids everything they need. And if you care about kids and you're out there doing this job, to know that you are not humanly capable of doing the best for these kids who are our most vulnerable, it is a horrible weight on your shoulders. And most people can't stand under that weight long, no matter how much you pay them.
Chairman Farmer.
And Representative Johnson, I appreciate you bringing this bill. It's just that, I don't know, about a month ago, we had the department down here, and we were talking through this, and they'd love to be able to have this, this 20 case limit, right? And I think what you're saying is kind of the same thing over again, just in a different way. The department wants to get here. The department is trying to get here. We want to be here. Nobody here is standing in the way. The Department of Children's Services is not standing in the way of this. We just need warm bodies to come that we can pay to take this job. We're just missing those warm bodies to come in. We'll welcome anyone that wants to come in here and work and be a caseworker and pay them well. We've got money to pay them. We will pay them well. We just need them to move to Tennessee and work. We have a problem with people wanting to work in this state. That's a big problem. People want to sit at home and complain about X, Y, and Z, but they don't want to work. Now, so if you can find a way to recruit people to come into this state, we'll pay them. And we'll hit this mark right here. But we just don't have the warm bodies to do it at this point in time. Thank you.
Representative Bricken.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And again, as a father of a daughter and son-in-law who has a foster care family, from everything I've been told, most DCS workers are primarily administrative functions. They provide very little emotional care and help for the children. Most of them, the DCS in the foster care side just really does mostly just administrative roles. So I don't, again, unless I certainly hear something different from DCS, I certainly can't support this legislation. I just don't think it's necessary.
You're recognized.
These workers are the go-between between those families and the agency when they're struggling, when they're having problems. It makes a huge difference what these workers are able to do and how they're able to visit these families, see what the needs are, and address them to a level that's important. And again, if you build it, they will come. They are not going to come to work here for the money. They are going to come to work here when it is a job that is manageable, because these folks, just like teachers, they do it because they care about kids and they care about families, and that's why they do it, and we need to pay them well. However, I'm telling you that what we've got to do are make the working conditions better, because those are the conditions our kids rely on.
Representative Stewart.
Did I hear you correctly that I'm looking at an article here? I think you cited Indiana as one of the states where there's 12 caseworkers or 12 cases per worker. Because what this article says from Indiana is that Governor Pence hired 113 additional caseworkers to meet that requirement. And there's a 2007 law, and he just went out and hired 113 people to deal with that requirement. To me, if we're talking about, you know, if Governor Pence's actions in Indiana are what we need to do, and it sounds like it is, you know, hiring caseworkers at that level may be expensive, but there we'd be talking about, you know, $10 million at $100,000 a caseworker. That's money, but it's certainly money that we have in the state of Tennessee. We have enormous amounts of money in our reserves. So I would just, first of all, I think it's a great bill. Second of all, if Governor Mike Pence can accomplish this task in a very economically similar state, that shows that we could do it here if we feel like it. So I just think it sounds like if it's practically, if this bill can be implemented practically in a state like Indiana, we have a stronger economy than Indiana. We can implement it here. So thank you for bringing the bill.
Call the question.
Question's been called for. Is any objection? Hearing none, all those in favor of sending House Bill 1974 to civil full, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. The ayes have it. I mean, the noes have it. Bill fails. So now you're recognized on item number 2, House Bill 2690.
Yes, and that one's got an amendment. Should have, does it? No, it doesn't? Okay, it's, all right, so this bill.
We don't have a motion or a second.
Motion.
Okay, properly motion and second. You're recognized.
A lot of the information I just gave you kind of, in a way, applies to this bill as well. There's reporting that gets done on how many, what the caseload is per month. So that's 12 times a year that they get the numbers for what the caseload numbers are. And what we're asking, so that the department can be more nimble in how they assign cases, if we took that number every week, so that we know, because cases are assigned every day. You know, cases aren't just assigned once a month. New cases are assigned every day. If we took that weekly number, that's going to help us be more nimble in who we're assigning caseloads to.
Representative Johnson,
yes,
you were describing the amendment that you didn't file.
I asked about an amendment, and somebody shook their head and said, I didn't have an amendment.
We don't have an amendment, but you're talking about, you were describing an amendment.
Yes.
But it isn't filed. We don't have it.
That's bizarre. Okay, can I roll this one?
We can roll you to the hill and you can see what's going on.
Okay, thank
Right.
you. I appreciate that.
So without objection, we will move House Bill 2690 to the hill. So we're going to go out of order and call up Chairman Zachary on House Bill 1301. Properly motioned and second, and I see you have an amendment.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. I have an amendment, drafting code 14987.
Does it make the bill?
It does make the bill, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Well, let's get the amendment on the bill, and then you can describe it then.
Thank you.
So all those in favor of Amendment 14987 going on to House Bill 1301, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. So we are on 1301 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. Members, this legislation will strengthen the Safe Haven Law of 2001. Currently, a woman in crisis that cannot care for her child can confidentially surrender her baby. As law is written today, unfortunately, she does not have anonymity. There is blame and shame and naming now associated with any kind of surrender of a baby. The lack of anonymity in the law today leads women to place their babies in dumpsters, apartments, on the banks of the river, or on a front porch. And I use these specific examples because those have happened in Tennessee within the last 18 months. In the last 18 months in our state, unfortunately, we've had 5 baby abandonments. 2 of those babies have died. This legislation will move our state to a safe haven for surrendering babies through the Safe Haven Baby Box. The legislation will allow for the Safe Haven Baby Box to be installed in police stations and firehouses across our state. Currently, Madam Chair and Committee, 92 Safe Haven Baby Boxes have been installed in Indiana, Ohio, Florida, Kentucky, and Arkansas. Since Indiana installed the Safe Haven Baby Boxes, they have had no abandonments in 4 years. Arkansas has had no abandonments in 18 months and just had a baby surrendered in a fire hall in Conway, Arkansas in the last 2 weeks. States that have passed safe haven laws that have not yet installed the boxes are Maine, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Pennsylvania. And there's numerous states that are right now considering legislation to update their safe haven laws. This box will be installed on the side of a firehouse or fire station. It is climate controlled. There are multiple alarms with the box. When a mother opens the box, an alarm goes off on the inside to let them know the box has been opened. When the mother closes the box, it automatically locks the box and an alarm goes off and 911 is called and the baby is immediately picked up, because these Safe Haven Baby Boxes can only be installed at a facility that's manned 24/7. And then there's stipulations within the legislation that it require the baby to be immediately taken to the emergency room, checked. The advantage of the Safe Haven Baby Box is it gives the mother complete anonymity, which the mother does not have right now. And so we're updating laws from 2001 to provide that anonymity. The good thing about this, there will be no fiscal cost to the local community or the state. We have a donor who has a foundation who will be covering the cost for all these boxes. There is no cost to the state. This piece of legislation will save babies' lives by updating that, and that's what this is all about. And with that, Madam Chair and members, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Before I do that, Knoxville, the City Council in Knoxville has already passed a resolution to support the first installation in Knoxville in one of our fire halls. So after this passes, we will have the first installation in Knox County, and again, $15,000 paid for by private donors. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for bringing this bill.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I brought it when it was just a box that was sitting outside the fire departments and churches and things. So this is so much better, and the child is protected more. So thank you for doing this.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a great bill. Any questions? John, Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairman Zachary, thank you so much for bringing us. This is an amazing legislation. You mentioned the incident in Conway, Arkansas a couple weeks ago, but there's, from where I live in Memphis, we get a lot of reporting from elsewhere in Arkansas, and since they put this into law in Arkansas, it's saved so many lives, and it's so convenient for the mother or whomever, and it is just an amazing piece of legislation. I've seen the technology, and am very excited for it to be installed all over Memphis. So thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Gillespie. If you just simply Google Safe Haven Baby Box, there's a 1.5-minute video, and it shows you the box. I sent that out. Tried to send that out to the committee to make sure you could see that. It is incredible to see this installed and the process that happens, and then they flip you around and show the inside after the baby is pulled out. It's literally dropped into a bassinet. It really is incredible. And I do want to thank, keeping their anonymity, I do want to thank the donors and the foundation who have stepped up to save babies' lives by providing the money to be able to install this. And again, the first one will go in the city of Knoxville.
It's great. Thank you so much.
you.
Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor of House Bill 1301 as amended going to civil full, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. You move out to civil full.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee.
Thank you. So we're going to skip around again because Chairman Leatherwood's not here. So we're going to go with Chairman Hawk, number 13, House Bill 2307. Properly motioned and seconded. You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair and
And
members.
I do see an amendment.
We do have an amendment that will make the bill. Drafting code 015528.
Properly motion, it does make the bill?
It
So
does.
properly motion and second. We'll go ahead and put that on without objection. All those in favor of adding Amendment 15528 to House Bill 2307, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. You're recognized on House Bill 2307 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. We are working on legislation that will support families by ending assessment and collection of fines and fees on youth involved in the Tennessee justice system. That is what this bill will do. National research has shown us that fines and fees on youth offenders are linked to higher recidivism rates and contribute to decreased investment in the economy. Fines and fees on several youth can lead to economic and emotional harm as well, and often trap these youth in cycles of debt and court involvement for the rest of their lives. Finally, these fees and fines generate limited and unpredictable net revenue for governments and are collected at decreasing and inconsistent rates across Tennessee. I know we've got several concerns about the piece of legislation through DCS, Department of Safety. Several folks, I'm sure the committee has some concerns as well. We are wanting to work with you and work with all of our state departments to see what message we can come up with in crafting the best piece of legislation possible. There is going to be a fiscal note available to it as well. We're trying to figure out a little more on how the fiscal note was created and what we can do to work on the fiscal note as well. But certainly, I do have someone here who is much more of a subject matter expert than I am, if need be. Dr. Carol Suval is here from Vanderbilt to. She's the director of the Youth Opportunity Clinic at Vanderbilt Law School. If the committee would entertain such a request.
Okay, without objection, we'll go out of session and call up Dr. Saval.
Thank you.
Please come forward and state your name and who you're with, please, for the record. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. My name is Kara Suval. I'm a law professor at Vanderbilt Law School, where my scholarship focuses on reentry and collateral consequences for youth who are system involved, and I direct the Youth Opportunity Clinic, which represents teenagers and young adults who are trying to move on with their life after system involvement. Many of our clients struggle under the weight of these fees and fines, and that's why I'm really proud to be among a broad and diverse group of organizations, including Stand with Children, Americans for Prosperity, the NAACP, ALEC, the Beacon Center, the ACLU, and Free Hearts. We're all interested in supporting this effort to get rid of juvenile fees and fines for youth and families. I'm thinking now of a client in his 20s who's on a wonderful path right now after being on a not wonderful path in his teens. And even now, many years after his juvenile case is over, he is still not able to get a driver's license because of fees on his juvenile case. And fees, which make up the bulk of the costs that we're talking about here, especially in juvenile court, are supposed to be these administrative efforts to recoup costs. They're not meant to be punishments. They're not meant to be negative consequences. But in reality, they act as these negative consequences, holding people back from their goals and making it hard for families to support their basic needs in the short term. The juvenile justice system has a wide range of tools at its disposal to address concerns around accountability, around public safety, and around rehabilitation and pro-social development. Those tools include things like community service, mandated programming, terms and conditions of probation, and those types of tools get at the goals of the juvenile justice system, whereas fees and fines often work against them. As Representative Hawk mentioned, national research shows that having these fees and fines actually increases the likelihood of recidivism. We know these fees and fines also increase the length of time that young people are involved in the juvenile justice system, which also contributes to more negative outcomes and higher risks of recidivism. And the way things work now, these fees and fines, the ones in juvenile court, are actually assessed on the parents and legal guardians of young people. So it's not just an issue about youth justice, about the young person themselves. It's about the whole family unit. What does this do to a family where a young person needs their family's support more than ever when they're trying to get back on the right path? And this can really interfere with that. There's also, of course, concerns about younger siblings and things like that. When resources are being taken out of the families that are most at risk, the outcomes are worse for the whole family unit. And on top of that, as Representative Hawk mentioned, these are inefficient and unreliable ways to fund our court system. We only collect around half of the total assessed fees and fines, and the data we've gotten so far shows that it costs us about 1/3 of the amount we collect. We spend that much to try to collect it. So it's a really inefficient way for us to fund our system. So these are all the concerns why I'm excited that this legislation is up for consideration. And again, a broad, diverse group of supporters urge us to learn more about this, again, to work with organizations and agencies that have concerns, but to push this forward. And I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has.
Okay, you mentioned community services taking the place of fines and other things. So will there be any punishment other than community services, or will that depend on what their crime that they have committed?
Yeah, it absolutely depends. And it's not, that's just one of those tools in the toolbox there. So community service is currently an option, and it's one that fits the goals of the juvenile justice system better. There's also still all the other range of consequences, right? Terms and conditions of probation. As part of your probation, you have to do X or Y. There's mandated programming. You have to attend anger management. You have to attend, different programming and counseling. So there's detention, of course. There's a wide range of consequences that juvenile courts have to work with that meet the goals of the system, and fees and fines just aren't good fits with those goals that the system has.
What kind of community services do you recommend? What do you think would be comparable for instead of a fine?
So I guess I'll adjust, but I wasn't sure if you mean community services, like ways to, resources from the community or service in the community. But
Service in the community.
Okay, so I think there's just, I think this is really a local sort of question. Different court systems have different relationships with different organizations, right? It could be, spending a day cleaning up an area of their community. It could be taking care, I think it really depends on what it is. I think the point is that the way that it works now is that we are saying the consequence of you doing this, and again, the fines are just a small piece of this, it's mostly fees, but for fines, we're saying the consequence is that your mom needs to pay $50, right? The consequence of you being truant is that, it's kind of this, a step removed. So there are different tools that the juvenile justice system has, like appropriate community service. I would think if it's school-related, maybe something that has an educational component makes sense. If it's a driving-related offense, maybe something that would teach a young person something valuable that they need to know around that might make sense. But I think it would really depend on the local court's relationships and what makes most sense for a particular community.
And who would follow up and make sure that these juveniles do their community service?
So community service is already a very common consequence in the juvenile justice system, and it depends on what stage of the process things are at. But it's usually court officers or probation officers or supervision work. I mean, these are already things that are in place. So we're not asking courts to create a new community service program. We're just saying that type of consequence for a young person is a tool that already exists, and a tool that that makes more sense given the goals of the system, right? To have it be a consequence, a rehabilitative consequence, a consequence that the youth feels directly, as opposed to the way that we have it work now, which is stressing out their family further by imposing a financial obligation that many families aren't able to meet.
Okay, I have two more, then I'll open it up for you guys. So they would be on parole, and they would report to a parole officer?
Not parole. So the court system, in part thanks to the Juvenile Justice Reform Act in 2019, there's informal adjustment, which is a type of supervision that happens even before a young person is formally charged. It's a voluntary form of supervision. It's usually overseen by family juvenile justice workers or probation officers of the county, depending on which county. So it doesn't necessarily mean they are on probation, but yeah, there's an accountability mechanism. Usually the same people that would supervise probation or pretrial diversion, they can supervise compliance with any of these terms, and they already do.
Okay. And the last thing I have to ask right now is the retroactivity
Yeah.
of the bill. I mean, how far back would that go? And what about the ones that paid their fines and their
So
fines
people
and
who
fees?
pay their fees and fines, presumably that means they were able to pay their fees and fines. I could see that seeming a little unfair, but what we're talking about now, and actually the client example I gave is a perfect example of that, a young man in his mid-20s who's never been able to get a driver's license because of fees. So I think, in general, this debt is pretty much uncollectible after a year, right? It's if you don't have the money, you don't have the money, and the rates of collection are incredibly, incredibly low. So it would just look at the debt that is outstanding from that period. So it would erase the debt for people who have outstanding court debt. And this is debt that wouldn't exist today. So under the current system, the debt would attach to the young person's parents. So these are just people who didn't get the benefit of the wonderful changes that happened in 2019, which changed how fees and fines are assessed.
Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of questions. Again, if this, all the fees and fines were removed, the total cost would have to be borne by the taxpayers and the citizens of the state. So, I mean, that we should always bear that in mind. But I have a couple of questions. One is the range of these fees and fines. Can you cite kind of from the low to the high? But would it be possible, instead of removing the fees and fine, just allow the judge discretion on imposing fees and fines? Because certainly not only are some parents not only capable of paying the fees and fine, I would make an argument that some parents deserve the fees and fines for possibly some negligence in their own parenting. So if the judge saw fit to that, I think we should allow him to do so. So, but if you can address the question about kind of the range of these fees and fines, I certainly would appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So the fees and fines have a pretty broad range. Some of these are 50-cent fines that add up, right? There's copying fees, there's archive fees, there's, dozens and dozens. Some of these are $4, $6, and they just add up on top of each other. The highest range of the fees is $300, and that's related to certain types of assessments, things like if the court believes a young person needs drug treatment and they need an assessment, things like that. So I'd say it ranges from sort of less than $1 all the way up to $300, but they sort of add on top of each other. So you add some copying fees, you add a continuance fee, you add archive fees, you add the disposition fees, right? So these things are sort of all over the place and they add up.
And just to follow up for clarity, the example you cited about the juvenile that doesn't have, they're 20 years old, that doesn't have license, I thought the fees and fines were on the parents or guardians. So why would this child not be able to get licensed if they go to the guardian or parent?
So that change was in 2019 through the Juvenile Justice Reform Act, the shift to it being the parent and the guardian as opposed to the child. So I'm talking about a young person whose juvenile case happened before this went into effect in the summer of 2019. And there's still not, right, there's a lot of people in that young adult range that, we want to launch, we want to succeed, we want to get and keep on that right path. That unfortunately we're not able to benefit from some of the positive changes then. There are still some fees that would fall on young people, license reinstatement fees and things like that, that even under the 2019 bill are going to continue to be a problem, unfortunately. And your other question was about this being a decision that's made by individual judges in each case. The Sycamore Institute actually just put out a really interesting, helpful report about ability to pay. and how it's kind of a disaster across the state. There's multiple different standards, judges, courts, and then judges within courts across counties using different standards, different processes. It's a really burdensome process for applicants to know that's an option, to figure out how to do it, to take the day off work, to go and take care of it individually. And it leads to some pretty wild results. There was this data on one specific fee that showed that in some counties, judges would sometimes, for one specific fee, the administrative fee for being assigned a public defender, judges like in Crockett, Fayette, Hardeman, Moore, and Macon were waiving almost all of this one specific fee. And then there are other counties, I think 14 counties, where they waive it in 0% or less than 1% of the cases. And it's not because everybody's indigent in one county and nobody's indigent in another. It just leads to really a hodgepodge, an inefficient and unfair hodgepodge, where depending on where you are, depending on whether you can navigate, certain processes, whether you can take that day off from work, you'd be able to access that. So it's a big burden on families to try to work each of these out individually, and a big burden on the court system to have all these extra hearings and things like that.
Well, I might take some disagreement on the big burden. I just do think judges, if appropriate, to assess fines and fees if they think it's appropriate. And I just think if you take that away from them, we're making a mistake.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So we have some other speakers. Thank you. So now we're going to call safety up. Please come forward and state your name, who you're with for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members, James Held, Legislative Liaison, Department of Safety. Hope everyone's doing well. I wanted to speak to one aspect of the bill. Met with Chairman Hawk earlier in the week, so we appreciate working with him on this bill. Our concern from the Department of Safety has to do with Section 37 of the bill that would nullify all fines and fees for certain youth. Our concern would simply be when it comes to some federal rules with FMCSA, the Federal Transportation Agency, when it comes to any CDL licensee or somebody who wants to become a CDL or get a CDL, there are certain fines and statutes that we're not able to get rid of. And so that would be our main concern with the bill, is that specific section. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Held? Representative Gillespie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I just understood you correctly. Are you saying that if we get rid of certain fines, then maybe these licenses won't be honored in other states? Or what are we talking about here with the CDL license?
No, absolutely happy to explain that further. So when it comes to certain statutes or certain citations that they could get to, the way that the bill is drafted is that it could apply to any court citation that they receive. And so for certain, they call it masking when you basically nullify certain violations that a youth could have. And we wouldn't want that to happen. It could not be consistent with any FMCSA regulations that we're not able to do that. So that was what I was trying to address. And I apologize if that wasn't clear.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next, we have DCS. If you would come forward and state your name and who you're with for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair Lady and committee members. My name is Jim Lehman. I'm with the Department of Children's Services. The department was in a position of working with sponsor on this legislation. It's a piece of legislation with a lot of sections. There's about 40 or so, I believe, and there was just one that concerned us. It was Section 17, and we shared this with the sponsor. Current law allows for the department to pursue child support modifications such that when children are committed to DCS custody as delinquent and they're sent to a YDC or Wilder or something like that, we would be entitled to receive a part of the child support in order to provide for the care of the children. We think this is a right and appropriate thing, given that if the kid is in our custody, we are the ones putting a roof over their heads, putting food in their bellies and clothes on their back. We don't think it's the right incentive to parents to say that if a child is committed to DCS custody, that child support would not be provided to the ones that are paying for the care and would remain with the parent. Of the child who was committed to DCS custody. So that's our concern, just that one section. Mohammed El Casey is our Chief Financial Officer. Was there anything else that I missed?
I just want to add also that there is a federal requirement that the state has to show effort of child support collection, especially for children that are placed in what we call it 4E placements, and the delinquent kids in DCS can be placed in a foster home, can be placed in residential facilities. So lack of effort, if we were to stop collection child support, that would be considered lack of effort from the department to comply with the 4E requirements. 4E for the feds is offset to federal collection of 4E. So the feds expecting for a child who's a 4E that the department would do all it can do to collect some portion of child support, which will offset the federal revenue as well. So that's the other financial part of that. The amount that's collected on that's based on the proportion of the delinquent population in DCS.
Vice Chair Eldridge, you're recognized.
Just a thought here. How many kids that are placed in your custody, how many of them would you say that you're collecting on?
We for every child that come to custody, we file child support. There's no exemption. Every child we file, some of them we receive collection, some of them we do not receive collection. Some is large, some small amount. But last year, roughly, it was about 9,900 kids we collected child support for the last fiscal year, around that number.
Out of how many in DCS custody?
This is for the entire year, so we have some kids comes and go. So if we want to look at some point of time, I'll be glad to get back with you with the answer on that.
Okay. And if I may clarify, I think Mohammed speaking, we filed that for all delinquent, unruly, and neglected children, whereas the bill would only eliminate the child support for delinquent children. So that it's only the cost to us from the bill is only that population.
Yeah, thank you for clarification. Yeah. I appreciate that. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? I guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
So without objection, we'll go back into session. Do we have any questions for Chairman Hawk? Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Based on any of the discussion, you thinking your bill needs to be amended before it goes further?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chairman Bricken. I do think that there's some needs. The section that was mentioned by Department of Safety, Section 17, which I believe was the section to work on there, and there may be some other sections as well that we need to work on. So I'm at the will of the committee. I'm happy to continue working on this legislation, if it be through passing on to full and work on it in the full committee, or whatever the will of the body is.
wanted to, because I do like the bill, and I think a lot of good stuff is in the bill. And of course, if you were to work with DCS and with safety and to make those changes, I would be in favor of us moving it to full, making those changes. And if those changes aren't made, I will vote against it in full.
Well, it's mighty broad to move. It's mighty broad to move to, it's not ready to go to full committee, because it's got some, I like a lot of it, but there's some of it that just need, especially the child support, we need to really consider that too. Yes. Chairman Farmer? Nothing, okay. I'm just listening intently. Okay. Representative Stewart.
Madam Chair, are you suggesting, are we going to keep the committee open until next week if we keep it here?
No, the committee's going to close this afternoon if we get finished by 3:45.
Okay.
Okay. Chairman Farmer?
Yes, sponsor, we're here. It doesn't sound like the bill's going to move out of committee today. It sounds like this is the last committee meeting. You're a seasoned member and a very well-respected member. What would you have any suggestions for an easy landing for this thing at the end of this year? Consider we're going to go into a new session next year, maybe, I don't know, there's a couple things we could do, but what do you think?
Thank you, Chair Lady. I do appreciate the comments and the concerns, and I have those myself, and I've had several conversations. The bill is a work in progress. We joke about what a summer study is, but if there were a way to have some depth of conversation about this legislation, if we were able to communicate, there may be some other issues out there, but the two that have come to our attention with Department of Safety and Department of Children's Services, if we can address those in some type of a setting outside the committee and work on a true in-depth study of this issue, then I would be willing to do whatever the will of the committee is.
Okay. Representative Stewart.
Your object question.
Objection.
Object that.
Well, there's three hands. But there is an objection. So, Chairman Farmer?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if Representative Stewart would withdraw that, I'm going to make a motion. We send this to summer study. Take a look at it, as the sponsor said. Take some time, and we'll. I mean, it's going to be a new session next year. We can look at it. Be a new piece of legislation filed at that point in time. So.
Did you have some remarks? Is that his motion?
Yeah. Let me just address Chairman Farmer's suggestion. I mean, here's my only concern, and I just wonder whether we might just hold the committee, because if this were a normal bill, a small bill, I could understand we'd send it to summer study. But this is an immense bill with this huge series of groups that are behind it, half of whom I disagree with on almost everything they stand for, and half of whom I think are great. I mean, there's this huge coalition that's pushing this bill. It has a massive impact on our state. We got plenty of room left in this session. I just don't know why we'd want to bounce this ball out of the court when we clearly, basically we have two governmental agencies that are supposed to be protecting children. They've come in and raised issues about very minor matters, about single paragraphs in this very immense bill. Why would we move this to summer study just because these two agencies need another week to get their act together? I mean, I didn't hear anything that sounds like this is a paradigm problem. This is just some very minor fine-tuning that needs to be done. So, I don't think we should send this to summer study. We should either keep the committee open, or we should move this bill out and get to the regular committee. If this is a small bill, that would be something. This is an immense bill. There are children across the state that are going to be injured if we don't do our business here. I don't know why we would artificially move this out for a summer. It just seems crazy to delay this, is my suggestion. So I would suggest we either move it out or, Madam Chair, just hold the committee open another week.
Chairman, Representative Stewart,
Suggestion.
the motion's been made to send it to summer study.
Well, I think we should oppose it.
Who called the question? Oh, wait, hold on.
Point of order as well.
Okay, we have to vote on, you called for the question, so there was objection, so we have to vote on that. So all those in favor of calling for the question, say aye.
Of calling for a question, not the objection.
The
I just want to make sure I vote correctly.
We're voting on the objection of the question. So all those in favor of on the question, say aye. Right? Those opposed, no.
Oh, what, Madam Chair, a point of order. I just don't think we know what we're supposed to vote on.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take a brief recess. Here we go. We're back in session. Chairman Farmer.
Hey, I'm going to withdraw my objection so that way we can vote on this bill.
Without objection. Let me find my place. So without objection, we will be voting on House Bill 2307, moving out to civil full as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. You move out to civil.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I did not mean to cause all this trouble. Thank you all so much.
We were trying to find a way to help you out there.
Yeah, okay.
Next, we have item number 12, 233 by Vice Chair Leatherwood.
Okay.
And I properly motioned and second? Second. Since this bill was summer studied and we need to reconsider our actions, I'm looking for a motion.
Motion to reconsider action.
So it's properly motioned and second. All those in favor, we must vote. That's what I was gonna say. We must now vote to, a roll call vote to reconsider our actions. Haley, please call the roll.
Representative Bricken?
Yes.
Votes aye. Representative Eldridge? Yes. Votes aye. Representative Farmer?
Aye.
Votes aye. Representative Gillespie? Aye. Votes aye. Representative Harris?
No.
Votes no. Representative Stewart?
No.
Votes no. Representative Littleton?
Aye.
Votes aye. Madam Chair, you have 5 ayes and 2 nays.
Thank you, Haley. Motion to reconsider passes. We are now on House Bill 233. We need a motion and a second. Properly motioned and second. And so I see that you have an amendment.
That is correct. I have drafting code 013226.
Does that make the bill? Okay.
Yes.
So let's get the amendment on. So all those in favor of Amendment 13226 going on to House Bill 233, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Chairman Leatherwood, you are recognized on 233 as amended.
Thank you. First, I want to say this bill changes nothing in the current law regarding marriages. What it does do is establish a form of marriage in the state between one man and one woman. It creates a recording of marital contract at common law document, which would be filed with the county clerk. So all this bill does is give an alternative form of marriage for those pastors and other individuals who have a conscientious objection to the current pathway to marriage in our law. Thank you.
Okay, we have an amendment from Representative Harris. Did you want to run that?
I'm not going to run the amendment until we ask questions about this one.
Okay. Are there any questions for Chairman Leatherwood? Representative Stewart, you're recognized.
Yes, what's the youngest, what's the age limit in this bill? Where does it say that you have or does it have an age limit in terms of marriage?
Okay. This bill, as the name of it implies, it is a contract. And, you know, I believe that this would not allow minors, you know, children under the age of 18 who haven't even reached the age of consent. I don't think the courts would uphold with this bill that they could enter into a marital contract here. So my thought, to answer your question, is 18.
Is the 18-year, hearing your answer, I mean, is there an age limit? Because, I mean, people younger than 18 can enter a contract, could do it on their phone with any number of entities. is there no age limit in this bill?
Well, again, with my understanding, I think it would be 18 is the way this would be construed. So.
Yeah, last question. But I just want to make clear just what the testimony is. There's no age limit?
No, there's not an age limit on this bill.
Okay, well, that would be I just want to make sure there wasn't an explicit age limit. My concern.
No, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. No, there is not an explicit age limit.
It's my concern to be you're changing the law because, of course, we have strict age limits on marriage in Tennessee, and I don't think we want to get away from that.
If I could respond to just one thing you said there, changing the law on marriage. And again, I know what you meant, but just to reiterate, we're not changing anything in current law right now. We're adding this to it.
Any more questions? Representative Harris?
Thank you, Chair Lady. So I guess the question really truly is for legal on this question, because it kind of goes to what Representative Stewart mentioned as far as the age limit goes. So your current language does not have an age limit. You're aware that our current law does have an age limit. You know what that age limit is?
Yes. Our current law requires you to go get a state license. And so the state is licensing your right to get married. You have to go ask permission, you have to pay a fee, and so you're getting a license there. And once the state gets in the business of licensing an activity, then yes, it has to put in the parameters for receiving that license. So yes, that is in current law, as are many other aspects with marriage. But again, this is a different form based on the common law of Tennessee and our country. So you do not get a license with this. You don't have to go get a license from the government, get their permission, pay a fee to get married. And one reason I ended up with the bill is former Register of Deeds. The usual, largest purchase anyone will ever make is their home. And you don't have to go get a license and ask the government to buy your house. That's just a contract between two individuals. And then, if you choose, the law doesn't require it to be filed afterwards either, but you can file that deed if you so choose. So it's two different procedures. One, the state is licensing, and once they start licensing an activity, they have to produce the parameters. This doesn't require the license, but people will file the certificate, may file the certificate afterwards.
And is this an in-person request that has to be made, or can this person do this over online, or how's this?
Actually, both parties, if I understand your question right, would need to show up and be present, show proof of, they have to have a government-issued ID as well.
So what in your legislation would stop a 16-year-old from going down with someone else to the courthouse and getting this done, since there's no age restrictions within your law?
Mm-hmm. Again, I believe the way this legislation would be construed with the courts and based on the common law pathway, I think it would be construed that minors would not be able to enter into this
So it would be assumed?
contract.
Assumed, so we're going to take the assumption that they would not include minors in this.
Well, everything on every bill up here, there's a bit of an assumption because we never know what court will say what on anything. But generally, I think it's a mistake if we try and base our decisions on what a court may or may not say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there any other questions? Seeing none, we're ready to, we have someone that wants to speak, Dakota Galban. We're going to go out of session. Could you come forward and state your name and who you're with for the record, please? And you have 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I think it's on now. All right. Thank you to members of the committee for having me here today. My name is Dakota Galvin, and I've been a resident of Tennessee for nearly 6 years, and I've been a resident of Nashville for 4. I proudly call Tennessee my home, and I come before you today as a member of the LGBT community to speak out in opposition of this desperate discriminatory piece of legislation, a bill which I believe intends to circumvent the landmark decision of Obergefell v. Hodge. What is clear is that this bill does not come from a place of kindness and understanding, but rather a place of prejudice and contempt. The rhetoric behind this bill implies that gay men and women have devalued or tainted the marriage process in Tennessee, and so it must be done away with in order to appease a small but vocal minority. A separate registry must be established so that certain groups can use religion as a guise to avoid using the same licenses afforded to same-sex couples. The nicest word that comes to mind is silly. In my opinion, this is just very silly. Every LGBT person remembers where they were the day that the Supreme Court handed down their decision in Obergefell v. Hodge. It's really an indescribable feeling to be recognized by the highest court in the land, just to know that the country you live in recognizes your humanity. And so it's a feeling that not many groups have felt before, and make no mistake about it, same-sex marriage is marriage, and it's as ingrained in our society today as interracial marriage or women's right to vote or integrated school systems. Same-sex marriage has absolutely no effect on opposite-sex couples' ability to get married and pursue their constitutional right to happiness. Bothered feelings are no basis for obstructing the equal dignity we as LGBT people expect as citizens of the greatest country in the world and the greatest state in the Union. I thank you for your time, and may God continue to bless Tennessee.
Are there any questions? See none. Thank you very much. So we're now back in session. Representative Harris.
I guess I'm coming back to this again because if we pass this out, this is another reason why I requested for it to go to summer study, because we're going to pass this bill out with no age limit on here and assume that each county is going to just not make a mistake and overlook when they're doing this process. But I would hope that we would consider that in our vote for this bill or vote against this bill, but we have no age limit restriction in this legislation at all. And that's very much a problem. But thank you.
Representative Bricken.
For the sponsor, I mean, this bill basically has to do with a form or the creation of a new form. It doesn't change state law on who could get married with parental permission, et cetera, et cetera. So nothing changes there. This is strictly to do with creating a new form that allows couples to sign a form that they feel more approximates how they feel in their marriage vows. And that's the long and the short of it. So we're making a whole bunch to do with in getting off in the weeds here, when this strictly is a form that we certainly should entitle our citizens the right to choose. So thank you.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And so it may sound small, but it is a problem when we haven't put the right, I mean, if we're going to take a friendly amendment to add the age, then that's different. but we're going to literally pass something out that has no age restriction on it at this very second, related to common law, which still won't be recognized, even if we do this. So we're going to still pass something that's still not going to get recognized by law. 14th Amendment was put in place for a reason, and we're just going to just let this slide all the way through without any construct to just the knowledge that this is going to still be an issue, even though it's something, I get the purpose of it, I get the principle and the point, but I'm also speaking, so at this very second, this is still a problem without having the age limit in there. If we go out of session and go ask legal will say it again. There's no age limit in this piece of legislation, and it's not correlating with our current law. So if there's an age limit that's somewhere that's going to be presumed in this, I would love to know that by legal.
Without objection, we'll go out of session, and Ms. Fogarty, you're recognized.
Michelle Fogarty, Legal Services. Under current law, it is unlawful for a county clerk to issue a marriage license to any person where either of the contracting parties is under 17 years of age. The amendment that has been adopted by the committee does not contain any language regarding the age of the parties. And Tennessee currently does not recognize common law marriage.
Thank you.
For legal? Yes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to ask legal to clarify that. So if this legislation passes, the age 17 current legislation for marriage approval by the court is still applicable?
You're recognized.
No, sir, that will be in a different part. That applies to marriage licenses. This creates a different part. And
would it overrule that?
It's very specific that a clerk shall not issue a marriage license where either of the contracting parties are under 17 years of age.
Well, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about two license forms, aren't we?
No, sir, there's no license issued in this bill. And just to correct, the state of Tennessee does not recognize common law marriage. However, if a couple lived in a state where common law marriage was lawful and they moved to Tennessee, then Tennessee would recognize their common law marriage because it was lawful in the state in which they became common law married.
Any other questions? We are back in session. Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you. I was curious. I kind of think like, so if folks go down this route to the courthouse and they obtain what would they obtain from the clerk's office to prove that they were married?
What they would do, the Office of Vital Records is going to develop a form, exactly what Representative Bricken said.
Okay.
That form will be available from the Office of Vital Records as well as from the county clerk's offices. So they would get this form, then they would have their marriage ceremony, they would make that declaration of marriage and all. They would have that form signed off on. And the layout of the form, again, as Representative Bricken mentioned, he's correct, would be established, and then they would return that form back. So they would get nothing from the clerk's office to get married, but they would get this form, this marriage certificate, which they would file back with the county clerk's office to show proof of marriage, which is necessary for name changes and insurance, and the federal government would recognize this, does recognize this form.
Okay, and that was my next question for you, and then real quick, make this quick. So would this just create, we'd have two routes in order, you could either go down this route to be married and recognized as a husband and wife, or you'd have the other route to be married if you wanted to be a same-sex couple. You could still be married just the way it's done now. Is that correct?
Correct. We changed nothing in the state law And frankly, I feel kind of like the tide has changed, and if there's any hostility, it's against those people that do believe marriage comes from God, not from government, and do believe it's between one man and woman. And somebody mentioned a smaller segment. I think they are a smaller segment. I don't think this is going to impact that many people. I think most people are just going to go forward with what most people have done for a long time. But for these people, they deserve, I believe, the respect. They don't deserve the hostility they're getting. And if there's any lack of kindness or understanding, it's not on the part of the people bringing this bill, because nothing changes. Again, today, a man can go get a marriage license and marry another man. You pass this, the day after, a man can go get a marriage license and marry another man. We're not changing a thing for them, but apparently they aggressively don't want those people with sincere religious Christian convictions. They don't want them to have something that meets their convictions. It's a little sad,
Thank you.
actually.
Thank you.
Chairman
Thank you.
You good?
And I'll be voting for your legislation, by the way.
Thank you.
Representative Stewart. Any other questions been called? Is there any objection? All those in favor of House Bill 233 as amended, moving out to civil pool, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. You move out to civil pool.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And it looks like we have gone over one more time. So I guess we will be meeting next week. I had a small speech out for our last day, but I'll save that for next week. But we do have a little cupcake for everybody to take with them. So you're recognized. You're messing with my speech.
I wanted to add to it. I wanted to thank you for running a fair process this whole time.
Thank you. Will you
we're
say that
not-
next week too?
I will, yeah.
Thank you. So all the remaining bills will be rolled to next week, and we do have cupcakes up here. They're all but burnt or all about burnt. They're delicious, and I don't want to take them home with me, so y'all please take one. We are adjourned.